Welcome to the next installment in our lecture series for the Principles of Microeconomics here at Rutgers University. And in this video lecture, what I'm going to take a look at is price discrimination. So what we're going to look at and what we're seeing here is we have a monopolist and we have a downward sloping demand curve, as we can see here, and we have the marginal revenue curve, which is inside of the demand curve, and we also have average total cost and marginal cost. And just for purposes of simplicity, I've made marginal cost and average total cost equivalent to one another. The reason for this is it just makes the illustration of the concept of price discrimination much easier. So if we were to assume that this monopolist is maximizing profits, we will see that they will set output where marginal cost and marginal revenue are equal to one another. So that gives us the profit maximizing quantity, QM, and if we go from QM straight up to the demand curve and across, we get the profit maximizing price. And this shaded area right here is the profits that this monopolist will have. We get this because the large rectangle, the rectangle that's bounded by price and QM, is total revenue. So the shaded rectangle at the top plus the square at the bottom here is total revenue. And if we subtract off total cost is Q times average total cost. So this unshaded area down here in the bottom is total cost. So what we have left over when we subtract total cost from total revenue is profit, and that's the shaded area right here. So let's assume now that this monopolist has successfully been able to segment the market into two distinct groups. One group of individuals who they've identified are willing to pay a higher price than the profit maximizing price, and a second group that is willing to pay a lower price than the profit maximizing price, and that lower price is still above marginal cost. So under that scenario, if we bring that out, apologies for the delay there. So that's what we have right here. And we have a group of individuals, and let me unhighlight that to make that easier. We have one group of individuals who are willing to pay a higher price. So at that higher price, the quantity demanded, at that P, the price discriminating price number 1, we have a quantity for the price discriminating price 1. Excuse me. Excuse me. So at that price discriminating price, the higher one, we can see that there's a level of output that's associated with that. So that's the group 1. This represents the individuals who are willing to pay the higher price for this particular product. We also have another group that is willing to pay a lower price. So here we have price PD2. And at that lower price, we can see what the quantity is equal to. It's QPD2. So we have two different groups here. We have one group that's willing to pay a higher price, and we have another group that's willing to pay a lower price. So we have quantity demanded associated with each one of those. Let's take a look at what the profits are for these two distinct groups. So let me highlight these particular areas, and let me pick another color. Here is going to be the profits that the monopolist makes from the group that it's identified as willing to pay the higher price. So they pay that price PD1, and there's an associated quantity PD1. And then we have another group that the monopolist is setting a lower price for. So they're going to increase their sales from QPD1 to QPD2 because they've lowered the price from PD1 and price PD2. So this is additional sales that the monopolist is inducing by lowering the price from the price discriminating price to the group that is less responsive to changes in the price. So if I highlight the profits that are incurred or made by selling to that second group at the lower price, this is the profits that the monopolist will get. And as we can see, that if we compare the area of these two red shaded areas, so those are the price discriminating profits, and if we compare that to the one price profit maximization, we can see that profits are larger. All right, we can see here that the original profits were equal to 12. Okay, so because we can see that the area of that is equal to 3 times 4, which is equal to 12. And then if we add this in, we have 3 times 3, which is 9, and 2 times 2, which is 4. So the profits when the monopolist engages in price discrimination is equal to 13, and when the monopolist charges one price and one quantity, their profits are equal to 12. So we can see that by segmenting the market and charging different prices to different groups of people, in particular when we're segmenting the market, we have to segment by different price elasticities. So for this first group here, they are less responsive to changes in price. And then that second group, when we lowered the price elasticity of demand, those individuals are more responsive to changes in the price. And by charging two different prices to those two different groups, the monopolist is able to increase their profits. Let's take this to a further extreme and assume that this monopolist is going to be able to perfectly price discriminate. And by perfectly price discriminate, what I mean is that they are going to be able to charge the highest price each individual person is willing to pay. So instead of segmenting the market into two separate groups, this monopolist is going to be able to segment the market by every individual in the marketplace. Now this is a highly unbelievable assumption that the monopolist would be able to determine the highest price every person is willing to pay, but for our purposes, just as an illustrative point, we'll do exactly that. So if the monopolist is able to charge a higher price to every individual, we end up saying that the profits are going to be equal to this red shaded area. So if the monopolist were able to perfectly price discriminate, this would be the area of profits, this red area here. All right, and let me actually delete that out and do this in a different order. All right, so let me copy that and then delete it. So this area here in red is the area of profits for price discrimination, and that area there is the area of profits when the monopolist charges one price. And let me actually put in that higher level of output. And let's say that's Q, perfect price discrimination. So if the monopolist were to charge one price and have one output level, this tan area here is the profits. If the monopolist is able to perfectly price discriminate, we end up saying that the entire triangle above marginal cost and between the demand curve is now the profits of the monopolist. So if they were able to perfectly price discriminate, you can see that there's a dramatic increase in the level of profits that the monopolist is able to make. How does the monopolist do this? Well, what the monopolist is in essence doing is converting all consumer surplus into profits. By charging every individual the highest price they are willing to pay, they are extracting 100% of the consumer surplus from buyers and converting that into higher profits. So I hope that was of some help to you in understanding the concept of price discrimination. In particular, make sure you remember the three criteria that are necessary for engaging in perfect price discrimination. One, you have to have a downward sloping demand curve. Without a downward sloping demand curve, you cannot engage in price discrimination. In a perfectly competitive market, price discrimination is impossible to engage in. Not only do you have to have a downward sloping demand curve, but you also have to be able to segment the market dependent on different price elasticities of demand. So you have to have a downward sloping demand curve. You have to be able to segment the market by different price elasticities of demand. You have to be able to identify individuals who will willingly pay a higher price for that particular product, and another group that is less willing to accept those higher prices, that are less responsive to, are more responsive to changes in price. So as long as you can segment the market into two distinct groups by their price elasticities of demand, you should be able to effectively engage in price discrimination. And the final point that's necessary is that you have to be able to prevent arbitrage. Arbitrage is buying and selling and reselling of a product at a riskless profit. The reason why this is necessary is that you can imagine that that group that we talked about that was purchasing at a lower price, if those individuals can purchase the product and then resell it to the people who are willing to pay the higher price, the profits of price discrimination won't accrue to the monopolist or the entity engaging in price discrimination, but they will accrue to the individuals who are engaging in arbitrage. So make sure you remember those three distinct points. If I do ask a question of this on the third exam, generally I always ask what the three criteria are to engage in perfect price discrimination. So make sure you remember that you have to have a downward sloping demand curve, that you have to be able to segment the market by differing price elasticities, and that you have to prevent arbitrage. So I hope this was of some help to you to understand what price discrimination is and how price discrimination is different than the profit maximizing price and output level.